when you find a letter in your mailbox from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and it's hand addressed to you, you know it's not going to be good. I opened the envelope and took out a single sheet of pink paper that was a carbon copy of a form advising me that the sexually explicit materials I had sent to my nephew Randy, who was an inmate in prison there, had been confiscated and were being held as contraband. And if I disagreed with the decision, I should take it up with the DRC, the Directors Review Committee. Sexually explicit materials? I am 70 years old. Where would I get sexually explicit materials? My idea of sexually explicit is not wearing my compression hose on a date. I racked my brain. What had I sent Randy that they thought was sexually explicit? Down in one corner of the pink form, it said that my offense was image on napkin. It came back to me. Last summer, I went to Florence, Italy. And while I was there, I visited the museum where Michelangelo's David is housed. Now, I'd seen pictures of David all of my life, but I underestimated the impact it would have to see it in person. You go into this large, dim room, and at the far end of the room, there's nothing in the room but David, with sunshine cascading over him because of a skylight just above his head. I wanted to just go over and just run the tip of one finger down the sculpture. But I'm always uneasy around grown-ups who wear matching outfits to work, like judges and cops and athletes and waitresses and museum guards. And there were a lot of museum guards around, so I refrained from touching David. But on the way out, in the tiny gift shop, I got 2 postcards and a Kleenex that had the image of David on it. Now, surely they weren't calling Michelangelo's David sexually explicit material. They were. At first I thought, I'd just blow it off because neither Randy nor I care if he ever sees the Kleenex. But I thought somebody has to put this into context. So I began gathering materials for a closely reasoned, factual, persuasive, eloquent letter to the DRC. Actually, Pope John Paul II was asked about David's nudity, and he said, before God, we're all nude. It's the impure heart of the beholder, not the art object, that's the problem. I'm down with that. Let the DRC purify their hearts. And let them send Randy his Kleenex. Now, Queen Victoria, on the other hand, would have felt pretty much at home on the DRC, I think. In the year 1547, the Duke of Tuscany made her a gift of a full-sized replica of David. When she saw David all a-dangle in front of her, she was so taken aback she had it moved immediately to the Victoria and Albert Museum where she wouldn't have to look at it. But the Duke of Tuscany was not stupid. He had a removable fig leaf constructed, and every time the Queen was on her way to the museum, they quickly put it on David. The Queen was happy and all went well. I thought for a moment, maybe if I just drew a little fig leaf on my last Kleenex, maybe that would get through the DRC. You know, but nobody really likes a smart aleck. So I refrained again. John Ashcroft was not stupid. He was, in fact, the 79th Attorney General. And now I just got thrown right off my track. And John Ashcroft took 8,000 of your tax dollars to buy a blue drape to cover the bare bosom of the work of art we know of as blind justice. Now, if there's ever a vacancy on the DRC, I think John Ashcroft is your man. So I got all the information together for the letter. My first few paragraphs were saturated with humility and regret that I had misunderstood the guidelines for communicating with inmates. And then tactfully, I brought up the fact that most of the rest of the world considers this a work of art that is beloved the world over. And that even though it's been hundreds of years since it was completed, people come from all over the world and stand in line for hours in the plaza. And I have seen this with my own eyes, and I have seen them stand there for hours waiting for just a few moments with this work of art. And I have seen yellow school buses with children in them pouring out of the buses and going into the museum and taking notes from their teachers about the importance of this piece of art. And I tried to explain the difference between sexual explicitness and nudity. The actual statue of David himself has nothing sexual about it. He is not depicted in an aroused manner, I know, I checked. And if you could picture in your mind for a moment the difference between David with an erection and the David of Michelangelo, and I know you've got that picture in your mind. You now know the difference between sexual explicitness and nudity in art. The context of the sculpture is not sexual in any way. It's not a bedroom. It's not a prostitute's hangout. It's a battlefield where David moments later takes a slingshot and slays Goliath with a single shot from his slingshot. And I just lost my place. If you'll give me a moment or maybe 10 minutes or so, I'll find it. Finally, I said in the letter, I did not want a file folder floating around the Texas Department of Criminal Justice with my name on it and with nothing in it but a pink slip of paper saying that I send sexually explicit materials to young inmates without also saying that this is Michelangelo's David, for crying out loud. It's based on a Bible story, for heaven's sakes. Well, the cynical among you probably think that I got no response to that letter, but you're wrong. I did get a response. I heard from them one more time. They're still not going to give Randy his Kleenex. But they say if I would pay the cost of shipping, they would send it back to me. And they asked me to take special note of the fact that they had changed the description of my offense from image on Kleenex to uninspectable tissue. grown men and women, getting up in the morning, putting on matching outfits, going down the road to work in the prison, and then spending their time there on your tax dollar, deciding whether, now is it image on Kleenex or is it indisputable tissue? I think the DRC is pretty uppity in presuming to judge any of Michelangelo's works for any reason. And I feel like sending them a big fat check, earmarked for art history books and a big old stack of fig leaves.